listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. And today, just like any other day, we have another special guest. We have a returning guest. We talked to Brad Taylor about a couple years ago. This time, this amazing former Special Forces officer and Lieutenant Colonel Brad Taylor has another book for y'all, Dead Man's Hand. First and foremost, how you doing today, Brad?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, sir. And thanks for your team giving me a copy, man. I appreciate being able to have the honor to read this. Let's talk about your military career and how that helps you shape these stories in these novels.
Yeah, well, I don't put anything in the books that I've actually done. I mean, I don't sit there and say, well, I remember this hit I did in Iraq there, I'm going to put it in a book. But you can't help but fall back into your own experiences. I mean, if you were going to write a book and you had a scene about swimming in the ocean, you'd think about what it was like to swim in the ocean. If you're going to write something about riding a bike, you'd think about, what it was like the last time I rode a bike. And for me, it's the same way. If I'm writing a story about a gunfight or operational planning or anything like that, I naturally fall back on my experiences.
When it comes to the character, Pike Logan, I mean, man, he is just sharp. He's on it, and he's just extremely focused on details. Kind of describe the storyline in this book and how he is leading his team.
Yeah, well, one thing I like to point out, I write the books, one of the things you see in the, Hollywood or anything else is, the protagonist, the good guy, is always doing the right thing. He's always making the right decision. If they'd let him take a drill bit to this guy's knee, he'd solve the entire problem. And that's not what combat's like. I mean, you make the best decision you can make at the time, and sometimes those decisions are good and sometimes are bad. And you live with that decision for the rest of your life. And I try to capture that on the page.
When you develop these storylines, I mean, it's like watching a movie. It's hard to start reading. And the details you have from setting the scene, setting the emotions from everybody. I mean, just in the very beginning when it starts out and it going in contest with everything going Ukraine, Russia, how you paint the picture so clear and keep it moving because it's a page turner. Yeah,
that's actually that's one of the hardest things about writing a book is you want the reader just to be able to flow through the book without he doesn't have to sit there and think about anything. He's reading the book. But at the same time, you've got to develop the character that's there. You want the reader to get a mental image of who they're reading about right now, who they've met in the past, who they know who this guy is. And that's really hard to do without, just bogging down everything and saying, we're going to take a time out now. I'm going to give you a dossier on this guy. So you have to do it through things that aren't dossier type, 5'10", blue-eyed, brown hair, blah, blah, blah. You've got to just dribble that out. This is what this guy is. This is his motivations. This is why he's doing it.
We're talking to Brad Taylor in his book, Dead Man's Hand, a Pike Logan novel. Not giving too much away in the book, but when Pike Logan finds himself caught in a crossfire between Putin's agents and the Wolves, how does his perspective on the Wolves mission evolve throughout the novel?
Yeah, well, the big thing, the whole thing about the Dead Man's Hand, it's a nuclear switch that Putin's put in place. So he wants to the partisans for the Wolves, they want to end the war in Ukraine. They decide the only way to do that is to get rid of Putin. So the next guy that comes in will say, we're pulling out of Ukraine. Pike finds out that if you do get rid of Putin, there's going to be a nuclear war. And so he's now caught between the horns of the dilemma of, I'd really like to help these partisans do their mission, but on the other hand, that's going to cause catastrophic loss. So now he's torn between, I literally have to protect Putin from the guys that I would like to win.
When it comes to the complexity of the U.S. military, you are able to incorporate current events involving that into the narrative. How hard is it to do that? And like you said earlier, not go into any special details.
It's getting a lot easier now because I've been out of it for a while. What I do is look at, there's three things for classification. There's units, there's locations, and then there's capability. Units and locations are easy. I just don't put them in. Capability, on the other hand, is a little bit harder because there's a lot of capabilities out there. And I now turn to criminals. They're figuring out capabilities left and right. Hackers and thieves and all these other kind of guys are figuring out capabilities that I never knew existed, and I use what they do.
When you look at the opportunities you have to just educate people with military, but give them a unique perspective, like an inside look, what do you hope people who are non-military will be able to gain from your series of all your books that you've written?
I actually, what I would like to get is, my primary goal is when I get an email that says I didn't get any sleep last night because I had to finish your book, that's my primary goal. So I don't have any overarching, I don't do politics in the books. I don't, I'm a reader before I'm a writer. So if somebody's feed me a bunch of political stuff, either from the left or the right, I don't care which way, I don't like reading that book. But I guess for this book, it would be that, counter leadership targeting or regime change, whatever you want to call it, there's always second and third order effects. And we rarely ever think through those.
Like I said earlier, your books, they read like movies. Are you considering maybe turning some of your books into any visual in the future?
Well, sure, I'd like to, but I don't control that. That's Hollywood. So, I've got, people always contact me about, I want to do this and do that. And if it ever comes to happen, that'd be great. But I write books. I didn't write a screenplay, so hopefully it happens, but I'm not holding my breath.
Once again, talking to Brad Taylor, True Honor, talking about him and his book, Dead Man's Hand. It is a Pike Logan novel. Last question for you. Pike Logan is a character that you just want to root for. And when you develop him and make all these twists and turns, how easy is it for you to make those plot twists to continue his legacy in these novels?
It's actually very hard. And it gets harder as I go along because you don't want to do the same thing you did in the last book. This is the 18th book. So that's one of the harder things is like, I'm going to do this. And then I'm like, you just did that. Or I did it 2 books ago or 3 books ago or 5 books ago. So it gets harder as I go along.
Once again, you can get this book right now. It is available for you to get. Dead Man's Hand, a Pike Logan novel. We had the true honor this morning talking to Brad Taylor with this exclusive. Once again, sir, thank you for your time, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.